Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-Commerce.
What is going on, Internet? Eric Van Holt's back again with another E-Commerce Conversations. I hope all is going well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of, I don't know if I should call this a desk or not, because I am in Peter Keller's office of Fringe Sport. Welcome, Peter.
Hey, thank you, my man. And please, don't insult my office furniture. This is ridiculous. You come to my house, my home, my office, and you insult my desk.
Well, it is my gear. I had to bring my own gear here, so.
You did, and your gear is definitely high quality as everything that you have.
Well, to be fair, your desk is holding up all of our gear, so it is nice. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And Peter and I go back many, many years. I would say it's got to be 8 years now.
Yeah, I think at least that.
At
Probably
least
in there.
And we just filmed a video together on the YouTube channel for the Beard Brand channel. He shaved off his beard that he had been growing for a year and got his hair styled and washed up and looking good. And I always love, Peter's been an inspiration for me because I feel like he's a little bit of a trailblazer. He's been doing the things that I need to be doing with Beard Brand. And I always appreciate his transparency. But it's been a year or so since you're last on the podcast.
That's right.
You've probably been on this podcast
I think only 2 times before.
Yeah, but were you with Carrie originally? Because you've written for Practical E-Commerce as well.
No, I've never been live with Carrie, and I have written for Practical E-Commerce, and actually that was a gig that you had hooked me up with, so thank you very much for that. But I've only been on this podcast once or twice before. I don't recall.
Okay. Doesn't matter. What does matter is the listeners go back and listen to this podcast.
For sure. A lot of people dug my last appearance on here, and I can't remember what I talked about, but I remember that a bunch of people reached out to me and were like, wow, thank you so much for sharing that. And I was like, you're welcome.
Well, I would say you're always so transparent, and it always seems like you're going through shit.
This is just my ride, man.
Yeah.
I ride the roller coaster. And, speaking with transparency, one of the things that always irritated me, so we're in e-commerce. And to me, I've always seen e-commerce as being very close to the digital marketing space, like the Tai Lopez. These are my books. Oh, don't pay attention to my Lamborghini. The books are more important than the Lamborghini. Mm-hmm. And I've always felt that e-commerce is so close to that digital marketing space that it's so full of people who are just so full of crap. They're not running a business that's any good at all, but they're going to try to BS you that their business is amazing, or they're going to try to sell you some sort of course on drop shipping or whatever. And I've just always been repelled by that. And so I always tried to be like, hey, man, this is what's going on. This is warts and all where we are.
Yeah. There's an old school saying, those who can do and those who can't teach.
Yeah, I heard that one.
So I've always been kind of skeptical to those selling courses, but there's certainly, I think people who can do and teach as well. I did a course with Founder Magazine. I don't know if you know Nathan. He was on the show as well, and I think what they're doing is really good because he's actually bringing in the people who do as teachers, kind of like masterclass, but for entrepreneurship.
Awesome. So I do want to mention that I'm personal friends with a gentleman named Mike Jackness. Do you know Mike Jackness?
Yeah. He was on the show too.
Amazing. So Mike, I know really well personally, and he's someone who does. He executes, in his own businesses, and then he teaches. And so he's definitely one person when we were talking about, people who actually do and teach. Mike is one of the people that comes to my mind immediately.
But does he really sell a course, or is he just kind of he's got his podcast and
he has a community actually related to that, and he's got some trainings in the community, and I do think he makes some money on it, but I'll let him do his thing.
Steve Chu's another great example, a person who obviously builds and teaches, because I think there's just an immense joy to entrepreneurship that I feel like I'll sit back, and I've been thinking about this a lot. I just turned 41 a couple of weeks ago, and I feel like I've won in life.
Congratulations.
Legitimately. I'm physically active. Like my body's in good shape. I'm healthy. I got 2 kids who I can spend time with. I've got a marriage that we just celebrated our 16th year. And like everything, it's not easy. It's not like the kids are easy. The marriage is easy. The business is easy. And then I've got enough money in the bank right now that I can get canceled for 15 years. But if I get canceled for 16 years, I've really screwed the family. But
I've seen some of your tweets, man. Like that 16-year thing might happen. No, I'm just kidding.
So it's, like when you feel like you're blessed in life, you kind of do just want to share it. Like I want to share these secrets with the world. And they're not really secrets. I do think it's kind of like a mindset.
Yeah, could be. Wait, tell me the secret, man.
I don't know. I'm still falling in your shadow, Peter. I think you know the secret, man. It's not having that victim mentality. I think, for me, there's another thing that I thought about is like, there's the thoughts that go into my head or immediately come up in my head. And then there's the things that I say. And there's usually some process of filtering. And I look at people who I really admire as like, I want to use the word attractive, not in the physical sense, but they're just magnetic personalities who you just love. So specifically, the people who come to mind are Mike Rowe. I absolutely love that guy. I feel like he just can say no wrong. And then like Dolly Parton. I cannot imagine anybody who doesn't like Dolly Parton.
You're right. I didn't think that you were going to go there with Mike Rowe and Dolly Parton.
But yeah, I mean, like those, I think like Mike Rowe, maybe he's got some people who don't like him, but I can't imagine anybody not liking Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
Like she's so authentic. Or my perception of her is she's so authentic. And I always wonder, like, if I could get inside Dolly's brain and like, do the thoughts that come into her brain, are they that pure? Or is she just really good at filtering it? What do you think?
To be honest, I'm not the world's greatest Dolly Parton scholar.
Yeah.
But I get what
you've run into people who are just like genuinely warm and friendly and attractive and magnetic. And
yeah. So while you were saying that, and I was thinking about that, prior to you turning on these microphones, we talked a little bit about, let's say, roads not taken. Different areas that because I've been doing Fringe Sport now for 12 years, and you've been doing Beard Brand for a decade of your life. And we talked a little bit about kind of different paths, and we talked about other companies in our spaces and kind of where they've gone. And one of the things that I've wondered is I don't filter what I say very much. I'm very opinionated about strength and conditioning and garage gyms, because that's what we do, is we do garage gyms. And sometimes I see companies that have had more success, and I think maybe I'm just too pure, that I say too much of what comes in my head, and then I let that guide the company, and that has caused some real kind of missed opportunities. And then I think, well, is that a blessing or is that a curse, or is it both?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to winning that we talk about. And we were talking about, like, me personally before I hit record. Like, I don't feel like, as the leader and the founder of Beard Brand, that I've helped Beard Brand live up to its potential. I think it's underperformed what it could do with me as the leader. But along those same lines, the company is profitable. It grows in most years. If it doesn't grow, it at least makes money in those years that it's not growing. And the journey is enjoyable. So maybe the outcome isn't where I want it, but the inputs, like the energy I put into it, the things that I work on, the people who are around me, the problems I'm working to solve are very enjoyable to me. Like, I love going into work, and I love working on the things that I'm doing. So to that regard, like, Beard Brand is very much successful because it's delivering to me what I want out of this, and to my business partner as well, and hopefully to my employees. I mean, I don't think you're ever going to get a full, real, unfiltered look into an employee's or team member's mind, which I would love to. It's just like,
well, just fire them and then see what they write on Glassdoor. Then you'll get it, my man.
Yeah, well, I don't want to fire them because I mean, I love my team members, but like, it's kind of weird because like, like I've been an employee as well. So I know what it's like to work for bosses, and I know the thoughts that I've had that I didn't share when I was an employee. And, I just want to create a great environment for my team, but you can't do that if you don't know what's in their mind.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But back to what you had said about, Beard Brand possibly underperforming, or, let's say Fringe Sport underperforming. I'm not an artist in the traditional sense. I do think that to the extent that I am an artist, Fringe Sport is my art. What we create for our customers, what we create for our employees, what we create for the broader society, that is my art. And I've heard artists talk before about how they'll see a piece of marble, or they'll see, maybe I've read about this, piece of wood, and they'll see the sculpture inside the piece of marble or the piece of wood. And then it's really their job to free that sculpture. And it's kind of like an epiphany from God. Like God is showing them what the sculpture can be or should be. And then the artist just needs to get as close to that as possible. And maybe if they're truly touched by God, they can get like right up on it. And maybe if they're a little further from that epiphany, or a little further from being a genius of their art, they just kind of get close to it. And so that is something that I think about, in terms of talking about potential of your brand or of your company, how close am I freeing the art from the substrate or the surface? And could someone else have done a better job, or can someone else do a better job, down the road? Something that I think about sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think like these tropes are used because they're true. They're used ad nauseum, but comparison is the thief of joy, right? It doesn't really matter. Like what matters, and this is what I have to remind myself constantly, because I am someone who is competitive by nature, and like I want to win. I want to build a bigger business than people within my space and outside my space too. Like why? For what reason? For ego, right? But it doesn't matter. Like what really matters is where I was yesterday. Am I moving in the right direction? And it's like, how will an extra $1 million of revenue, how will that affect my life in any relevant way? Probably not at all.
Yeah.
Because I've added millions of revenue to the business over the years, and my life is still the same. I still row. I still like spend time with my friends and family, and I still have stresses. I still have projects I'm working on. So,
well, something about that, about the comparison. So I read a book by Ray Dalio called Principles, and many people have heard of it. And he had kind of an offhand comment in Principles where he was talking about I think a dinner that he had with a premier from China. And the premier gave him a book called, oh shoot, I'm forgetting the name of the book, but basically it was a book written by a Marxist. And the book was about a Marxist approach to what we might call the great man. So from a capitalist perspective, we venerate people who change the world. Think about Elon Musk, think about Steve Jobs from the entrepreneurial sense, or think about Abe Lincoln from like a historical sense, or the founding fathers or things like that. So I looked up this book that was just one line in the book Principles. It's out of print, but I got a translation of it. And basically it makes the argument that there essentially are no great men. There are, or no unique great men, let's put it that way, that the times produce men or women, people that kind of rise to the occasion. But it's essentially the time, like society, that produces that person. And I thought, this is really interesting. So basically it's saying that if there weren't Adolf Hitler, there would have been somebody else.
There would have been a different Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, a different Adolf Hitler. So I thought that was really interesting. So we're here in Austin, Texas. The University of Texas is here. Go Horns. I looked up a professor in Marxism from the University of Texas, and I said, hey, I'd love to buy you lunch. I don't really know anything about Marxism, but this was interesting to me. I'd like to discuss it with you. And so I went to lunch with him. I paid.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. He wants everything for free.
Exactly. And I talked with him and we had like a 3-hour long lunch. It was very enjoyable for me. And I just went in with an open mind and was just talking to him about stuff. But one of the things that he mentioned to me that I've carried with him is he is a true, as best I can tell from a 3-hour lunch, a true blue believer in Marxist philosophy. And one of the things he said is the greatest tragedy of modern society is that we judge the worth of an individual based on their economic output. And so when you were talking about like, hey, you want to win, you want to build the biggest company, you want to have, the most millions of dollars of revenue, that falls right into that rubric of judging a man or woman's worth based on their economic success. And, there are a lot of other things. Like you talked before about, being a husband, being a father, I would say even being a valuable member of society. On the other hand, it'd be nice to have a business that's twice as big as it is now.
I mean, well, I mean, it's easy for me to argue that and say there's plenty of examples of people who aren't economically valuable, who society values a lot,
Mm-hmm. Like who? I'm just curious.
Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks. Okay. Yeah, that's good. What about these days though? Because it seems like everyone who society values in like in the last 5 years or 10 years, they do change that valuation of society into some sort of, economic advantage. I don't want to get too political, but it does kind of boggle my mind that somebody like Bernie Sanders is a multi-millionaire, despite being an avowed socialist.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's...
we don't have to go. Okay, we don't have to go down.
I do think in to be fair to that conversation you had, in America, usually the first question is, what do you do? So there is a bit of identity drawn around, our occupation in life and a little bit of that. So I don't think he's too far off. And society is such an ambiguous term. Like Beard Brand's early phrase was to change the way society views beardsmen. And
I remember that one.
Yeah. And it's just like, well, society is just a collection of individuals, and ultimately it's just, like you have this concern over society, but there's no real official, this is what society is. It's your interpretation of what society is, or your interpretation of kind of the expectations. And that probably happens from the way you were raised and the people you've been put around. And my interpretation of society is completely different than yours and, everyone else. So
it reminds me of Milton Friedman. I've watched a lot of Milton Friedman on YouTube, who's very interesting.
You should check out David Friedman too, his son.
Okay. I have not watched David Friedman, but one of the things Milton Friedman, he would often do these Q&As on like the Donahue show.
Right.
And somebody in the audience would say like, oh, what about the evil corporations? And he would say something to the effect of, well, what is a corporation? It's a bunch of people that are trying to do something. So if you're saying the corporation is evil, it's actually, there's a CEO, there's a C-suite, there are all these other people who work for the corporation. Why are they, quote unquote, evil? And the person's like, well, I'm sure they're not evil, but the corporation is evil. And he says, well, the corporation is made up of people. The government is made up of people. Why are the people doing these things?
Yeah. Now, Milton had such a wonderful way with words. Like it did not translate to his son, but his son is a brilliant thinker as well. There's this video on YouTube for those listening called The Machinery of Freedom. And a YouTuber named Bit Butter illustrated him reading it off. And The Simpsons, that kind of scientist guy?
Yeah, Professor Frink.
Yeah. David Friedman sounds just like him. So it's like really fun to like listen to him, I guess it's fun for me because what he talks about is it's kind of along the same lines. It was like society has problems, and how do you solve these problems, and what makes government more efficient at solving these problems than the market? Because ultimately still people doing it. And why does the use of force work versus the use of really measuring value through profitability is kind of how the market works. So it's a great video. It's a great
hot economics talk.
Yeah, I mean,
with Eric and Pete.
Well, I mean, I think like if you're in business, like, and you don't have a strong understanding or finance, and really like, to me, I feel like one of the gifts that I've had is an understanding of economics to be able to kind of like predict how the world's going to work. Like kind of like this connection to finance and economics allows you to be I mean, not with 100% certainty because you can never predict the future, but just like understand how people react to things and how kind of macroeconomics has an effect on things.
I mean, I totally agree with that.
That was one of my tweets. I would say like, it was like, like a passion for finance and economics is just like one of the secrets to like elevating your life in ways that the majority of people don't. They're just like, oh, numbers, oh, math, I don't like it. It's like you're doing a disservice. Like your partner better love it if you don't love it.
Yeah. Well, I remember I wouldn't call him a mentor, but the parent of one of my brother's friends forced his kid, my brother's friend, to get an accounting degree.
Yeah.
The kid was a little bit, unclear about what sort of degree he wanted to get. And the father was an entrepreneur. And so he says, hey, you don't know what you're going to do, get an accounting degree. Because, if you want to go and do a quote unquote normal job or something like that, whatever, accounting degree is fine. But if you want to be an entrepreneur or you want to understand some of this stuff, having the understanding of the underpinnings that would then lead to, finance or, you get an economics education as well if you're doing accounting, that sort of thing. I've thought about that with my kids, but I
would say strongly disagreed with him.
Okay,
I would
interesting.
Say, yeah. I would say get a finance degree. Because I feel like accountants are about knowing the rules and then following the rules. Finance people are about finding opportunities and understanding how money works and the flow of money. So they're very similar, but like I aced finance. I got like a 98 in my finance class, and accounting was the only class I got a C in.
So I have an MBA from the University of Texas, and I remember on one accounting test, the professor wrote on there, I don't understand how someone can be an MBA candidate and understand accounting so little. And I was like, oh, crap.
Dude, I still don't know the difference between accrual and cash accounting. Like Patrick with Supply Company, he gets on me all the time. He's like, you got to be doing accrual accounting. I'm like, I don't know, man. It's just money in, money out for me. Like,
that's interesting. So we're switching actually to accrual accounting, more or less right now as we speak. And so I have a business partner, and you know this. And one of his metaphors is you should run your business like you're a third century trader. And a third century trader would essentially use cash accounting, because if they've got cash in the bank, then that probably means that they're doing okay. They can buy more inventory and then they can sell it, whatever. And if they don't have cash in the bank, then something's wrong. And so I think that there's actually a lot to be said for cash accounting.
Dude, yeah, I mean, you're preaching the choir to me. Like,
yeah.
Patrick will tear me a new asshole.
I didn't know we could curse on this pod.
Yeah. There are some limitations. I feel like there are. And maybe as you get to be a bigger company and those accounts payable are more solid and they're going to come in, it makes sense to do. But for me, it's just like, I either have the money or I don't.
Yeah.
And like to a certain degree, I know what I can expect to come in and I can kind of plan around that. But just the reality is like, I either got the money or I don't.
Yeah. So let me tell you why we're switching to accrual. Just so
we have to like legally when you're a company of your size, huh?
Oh, do you?
Well, I think
Whoops.
Well, I don't know what your size is.
Cut this.
Like at $20 million revenue, I think you have to switch from cash to accrual.
I got to make some calls. Cut this thing short.
Yeah. It used to be 5 million, and they raised it to 20 million to be able to run cash. So I'm probably going to run cash up until that point.
Well,
and you could have 2 books. You can have your accrual books.
Yeah.
For the IRS.
I will tell you that QuickBooks, if you do accrual accounting in QuickBooks, it makes it super easy to switch to cash. There's literally just like a toggle button at the top of the screen that you can just toggle back and forth. But if you do cash, you can't do accrual. But I'll tell you why we're switching to accrual from a like running the business standpoint, not from a legal standpoint or whatever. Yeah. The main reason is that my COGS, my cost of goods sold, just hammers around. So if we have a lot of freight that gets paid in 1 month, because I'm bringing a lot of containers over from overseas, then my COGS on my books looks really crazy high. Mm-hmm. And then if, say, the next month we don't have many freight bills, let's say we're bulking up for Black Friday. And so in October, we've got a ton of freight bills. And then in November, we don't have any freight bills or have very few. Then that means that October, our cost of goods sold is going to look crazy high because of all those freight bills. And then in November, our cost of goods sold is going to look crazy great, like super low.
Yeah.
And so that's the principal reason from, guiding the company is to get greater insight over our COGS from our financial statements.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. Like, I understand all the arguments for accrual. But to me, it's just like, well, know your business.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, yeah, I didn't make any money this month, but that's because I bought 3 months of inventory during the holiday season and it's higher. It's just like, in the next 3 months, I'm going to be more profitable. But if I'm not profitable in those next 3 months, then I need to fix something, So I don't know. Like, I will say that, if we have like 2 or 3 months that are red, you do start to kind of like tighten up your belt. And maybe that's good. Like, maybe it allows us to, really run a clean operation. I mean, we've always been very profitable.
Huzzah.
10 years of business, knock on wood. So it works for us. But I'm sure there's accrual businesses that can say the same thing. So there's no right or wrong way to build a business.
Well, I will mention, even having said that about COGS, we do have operational metrics that are not on the financials that do allow us to basically see what our COGS are on an order level. So we are running the business with that information. Just to share with you a little bit more about why a business might want to move to accrual is whenever you have other people's eyes on your books, they're probably going to want accrual. Because I have to say, we recently have engaged with a board of directors, and I brought in a set of books with my COGS hammering around. Oh my God, you'd think I'd serve them a dead rat on a plate. And they were like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
Your COGS look terrible. 1 month when we had a ton of freight, it was like, your COGS look negative.
Right.
What's up with this? And I'm like, no, COGS are not negative. You know what I mean? We're not paying $1.10 for something that we're selling for $1. And then, of course, the next month it looked amazing. So when you get a third party looking at your books, so for me, the operational metrics of looking at like order level margins and stuff like that, those were always sufficient. I've been doing this for 12 years, always sufficient for me. But then again, when somebody else wants to look at your books, at least in my experience, they don't want to hear that argument.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I guess one of the nice things about kind of like working on a business that you're trying to enjoy the journey is you don't have to sell it. So you don't have to do anything for anybody else.
Yep.
Right? The people who are building a business to sell don't think about building a business for themselves. They think about building a business for the person who's buying it. Mm-hmm. And that's got to suck. Like, to spend 5 years to be you're essentially working for somebody else, the person who's buying it.
Man, I got so many thoughts about this. So many thoughts. So one thing I remember is I'm in EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. And I remember one time somebody who had kind of a boring business, because like there's some people, entrepreneurs, who have these like exciting businesses, which, by the way, I sell barbells. So I fit into one of those like exciting businesses category. And one person told me, she said, Peter, there's a sexy business and then there's sexy money. Which do you want? And, I was like, oh, I want sexy money. And she's like, do you? I think about that a lot.
Yeah, I want both. And I got it.
Yeah,
that's the thing is, like, I think it's hard. Like, I feel like, again, going back to earlier in the conversation, I do feel like I've won because I feel like Beard Brand, in my opinion, is sexy. Partly because we've made it sexy.
I mean, you're sexy as hell.
I use my products. What can I say? But my business partner, he built his wealth cleaning carpets.
Good for him.
Like, that is not sexy at all. Like he made it sexy. I think it's the same thing. Like, what is it? Sexy money?
Sexy business or sexy money?
Yeah.
I have a friend who had a very unsexy business who recently exited for extremely sexy money. Ooh. And unfortunately, I can't disclose anything, but let's just say it would you'd knock your hair back.
Yeah.
And, good for him. And that's a real case there. But let's go back to your question of like building for somebody else. So one other story, I'll tell you another story. I like stories. So I did get that MBA from the University of Texas. And after I graduated, I had founded Fringe Sport. And I went to my favorite professor. He's a marketing professor.
Okay, it wasn't the Marxist guy.
It wasn't the Marxist guy. No, that's a different guy. He probably would have said, you've become the man.
The bourgeois.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to get overthrown, beheaded by your own employees.
Yeah.
Maybe he'd lead the charge. Who knows? No, I went to my favorite professor. He was a marketing professor. And I laid out to him Fringe Sport, what I'd built so far in a couple of years, which, we were still young, so it wasn't big. And I can never forget. He goes, "You're wasting your life."
Oh, really?
Yes. I said, what are you talking about? And he's like, Peter, you're talking about, a few $100,000 in revenue a month. You're talking about,
That's a lot.
I thought so. You're talking about shipping barbells from point A to point B. He's like, you need to go out there and you need to work for a multinational and you need to become a VP and you need to make, $500,000 a year and, work. I mean, I'm adding some in here, but work 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week and be
the
tied
NBA
to
life.
BlackBerry and never see your family. And like, that's what you're supposed to do. Like, that's what an MBA is supposed to do. And I was just sitting there staring at him. I was like, you're my favorite professor. you're shitting all over my dreams. But I was like, okay, cool. And I never went back to his office again. I thought he was going to be proud of me. Yeah. But instead he's like, hey, you need to go work for a multinational and actually make an impact on the world.
Well, I mean, what kind of impact is he doing? Teaching people? Nothing, right? He can't do jack shit. He can't even work for these companies.
I'll also remember one other thing. I'm not going to say his name, but I remember that I was in his marketing class when Steve Jobs announced the first iPhone, and he dedicated one whole class after that to how the iPhone was destined to be a horrible failure.
Okay.
And like the iPhone, for some reason, so irritated him that he changed up the curriculum of his class and dedicated one class. I mean, it's an hour and a half or whatever, but an hour and a half to him showing slides that he had put together and ranting about how the iPhone was destined to be a horrible failure.
Imagine if you're running a multi-billion-dollar company and you're hiring MBAs and you're getting talent like him.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's what you're getting. You're getting all these like people who think they're smart and they draw up these great presentations and they don't know shit. Like they don't have, and this is going to go on a little rant about public schools.
Go for it. Do it.
But people who have been through the public schools and private schools that operate like public schools pipeline, who are brilliant, they're really smart. They're able to retain knowledge that people have told them, but they don't know how to think. And like, I don't care about your credentials. I'm not a credential guy. I care about, there's 4 types of people. People who think and people who do. So those who think and do. There's people who think, but they can't do. That's like me. There's people who do, but can't think. And that's the majority of people who have gone through public schools. And then there's people who don't think or do. And, those are the people that we need to support in society. But I mean, like, it's just, I had to unlearn so many things in public school. It took me 10 years to do it. Took me 10 years. But anyways.
Wait, but I want to call back. Why did you say that you think but you can't do? I mean, were you just being self-deprecating or do you really believe that?
No, I'm terrible at execution. Like, I get bored.
What are you talking about? You built a freaking company that you've been doing for a decade.
No, my team did. My team did.
Who put the team in place? Is it one of your co-founders or was it you?
Yeah, probably my co-founder.
I'm scoffing wildly here.
I do have enough execution skills to kind of get to a certain point, but it kind of goes back to that visionary integrator. Like, I can.
By the way, we were talking about that before we started recording.
Yeah,
but yeah.
I think Beard Brain would grow tremendously quicker if I had that integrator who could just filter my vision and the way I think the business should grow and kind of like execute on that. But we've chosen to enjoy the journey. So my business partner, Lindsay, is incredible. She serves in that role. But she also is a mother and doesn't put 100% of her time into the business. And I'm okay with that. So it's like, we're okay with enjoying the journey, despite the fact that it's not going to grow as quickly if we had someone in there 100%. So there's always like the trade-offs we make. And I wouldn't trade my business partners for anybody. I feel like I have no offense to your business partner, but I have the best business partners in the world. Like, they are quite amazing people. So I can say with 100% certainty that the only reason Beard Brand exists and the only reason that Beard Brand has success is because I have business partners. Because I have a whole wake of failed Eric only projects that have gone nowhere.
Well, I still want to register my strong disagreement that you can think but not do. But whatever it is, what it is. But one thing I want to come back to, and this is something that we also talked about a little bit on this conversation, and we talked about a little bit in the pre-show banter, is you'd said you won, and you've said that Beard Brand is, you're enjoying the journey and you're really loving it and you love your business partners and stuff like that. You also said earlier in this conversation that you feel in some ways you've done Beard Brand a disservice. Like, you know, you're not living up to the potential. I mean, what if you are living up to the potential? Like, you're building something amazing. Like, I've seen many, many, many of your customers, and they freaking love the brand and they love what you do. I know many of your employees, they love what you're doing. I know Lindsay. I don't know your other partner, but, you know, she seems very happy. You seem very happy. So why is that a bad thing?
No, I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Okay.
It's just, you know, it's just, I think it's always just those battles you have in your head, you know, It's just like,
well,
it goes back to that filtering conversation, like the stuff that goes on my head and then it gets filtered. Like, I have to constantly remind myself, it's like, okay, we didn't hit the revenue that I perceive that I should be hitting, but that's okay because we've decided to enjoy the journey. We've decided that a slower paced growth is okay. You know, a drama-free environment is preferred over maybe a slightly higher drama, but faster growth. You know, like all these trade-offs you make in business. I don't think there's a silver bullet where you can have a laid back, chill, vibed environment that, you know, grows at breakneck speeds. You know, I feel like, and maybe there is, but I'm certainly not confident in doing that.
I mean, I agree with that. And I guess something that I also, this is on a different scale, but something that that makes me think of is it reminds me of, let's say, like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. And I know people who have worked at Tesla. I know a ton of people who work or have worked at Amazon. I'm sure probably you're the same, you know, with Amazon at least. And they all say that the work environment is horrible, like absolutely horrible. So let's talk about Amazon for a minute. A lot of the people that I know who have worked for Amazon are very intelligent people, and they work insane hours while they're at Amazon. They learn a ton, but they're stressed out all the time. And you even hear, I haven't had this happen to any of my friends that work for Amazon, but you hear these stories or read these stories about a relatively low-level employee at Amazon getting an email from Jeff Bezos at like 3 a.m. that is something to the extent of like, what the F is wrong with you? Because that relatively low-level employee screwed something up that somehow got on Jeff Bezos's desk. And yeah, I mean, so I think that kind of speaks to what you were saying about, you know, Amazon, even at scale, is still growing at breakneck speed. Right. Tesla as well, but the environment is, you know,
I think there's people who are drawn to that, but
that's true.
But it is a hard environment, you know, like, and the thing I would always question for people who perceive themselves to be intelligent or are intelligent and they're unhappy in their jobs, this is a question that I really love is, if you're so intelligent, how come you haven't figured out how to have a job that you enjoy? Right?
I haven't heard that. That's a good question.
like if you're really that smart, it seems pretty simple. Like me being halfway intelligent, I figured it out. And I know there's always like, you know, life is always more complicated and you got wives and spouses and bills and stuff like that. But if you're smart, you'd figure it out.
Yeah.
So no excuses. Anyways, I think we could probably do like a 3-hour conversation. Peter.
I was about to say more, and now I was about to say the really profound stuff that was on the tip of my tongue, but I guess I'll have to wait another year and a half.
Well, maybe we'll bring you on a little more frequently now that you're closer to my office. So, all right, guys, this has been another e-commerce conversations. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Peter, obviously, if you couldn't tell, is one of my most favorite people. So I love having him on the show. And
back at you, boo.
I love your insights. I love our conversations. We went, you know, a little bit off a typical style conversation, but I feel like that's what this show's about, e-commerce conversations. I
mean, I'm always good for tangents and hot economics talk with Eric and Pete.
There you go. All right, guys, this has been another e-commerce conversations. Cheers.
Peace.
Keep on growing.